So people often ask the question of how do you know when you're working with an inner child, right? It's like, don't we have a few different child parts? Am I just like, do I have an inner child? And we all have an inner child inside of us. We all have experiences, positive, negative, or medium experiences in our developing years. And when it comes to psychotherapy, what's really helpful and important for our clients is that when we're working with them, that we're able to understand when there is a certain presentation or a certain struggle, that we understand that it's not just a matter of talking to the adult and saying, don't worry, darling, you're going to be fine, or hey, let me just teach you a skill of what to do when you feel left out socially. But that we also understand that in each person we're a compilation of many parts. And so when it comes to the concept of an inner child, often what's really helpful and what I found really transformative with my clients is when I'm talking to a client and I hear that there is a struggle, or I hear that there is an issue, or I hear that there is a burden or a worry or stuck point, or a need to avoid, or a need to kind of get very needy or graspy, or there's these negative thoughts or beliefs in their head that just keep feeding them these fears or this very strong inner critic. What I get curious about is who's in the room with us. Is it really just that 42-year-old woman who has a career but's never really fallen in love and is feeling really lonely? Is it really this 33-year-old mom who had her second child who is talking about how tired she is because she can't sleep because her kids wake her up? Or is that person in the room, but is there also another aspect in the room? Sometimes that 40 something year old client is talking about not being able to find love, but also there's this emotional yearning for connection and this question of, am I worthy of love and attention? And then we need to work with not just the lived experience of this adult, but also what is she saying nonverbally? What is she asking nonverbally? It's not just a matter of, as a therapist, saying, of course you're going to find love. It's like, we want to slow it down. We want to look at, is there another part of her inside? Is there a struggle? Is there a worry? Is there an insecurity? Are there certain dynamics or interpersonal components that come up, or a way of coping, an old pattern of coping that this client is using for a while that's impacting their ability to kind of have certain relationships or certain beliefs? Okay. And that 33-year-old mom, is she exhausted physically? Of course she is. And I'm a big believer of, tending to the physical aspect, because when we're tired or hungry or sleepy, right? Like that's really important. And also, in that 33-year-old, there was her own little inner child who didn't get the proper kind of nurturing she needed. And so she found that nourishing her own children was so much more exhausting to her than to some of her friends, because what was coming up for her were a lot of emotional triggers around mothering and parenting. And so I'm just giving you two examples, but essentially when we're working with a client, we want to see, like, are there emotions that are there from the past? Are there beliefs? Are there memories, and they might be conscious or unconscious, that are living inside of our clients? And then can we work with that? Some clients, it's really easy to get in touch with an inner child. Some clients come in and they say, I have a 5-year-old inner child who is always very sad and angry. And my parents kind of only gave her attention when she was sad or angry. And so you know that there is a part, right? Or there's a child part to this client that learned how to cope or to get attention in that kind of way. Now, sometimes the client might say, I don't know. This is just who I am. I don't have an inner child. And so you want to be mindful about the wording that you use, because obviously you want your clients to engage in psychotherapy. But essentially, an inner child is that we have different parts of ourselves as we're developing. And we often have, a younger part of ourselves that lives inside of us. In all couples work or in all relationships, we always have some very young, sweet, tender parts of ourselves that just want to be heard and loved, right? I know sometimes in my work with men who have had very high positions professionally, in their work with their partners or in their family life, sometimes, their partners would say, I can't believe it, but he's so strong. I can't believe he has this very tender side to him. And I would always say, like, we all have an inner child. And love and connection is really all about my inner child feeling held by me and your inner child being held by you, and having a relationship or situations that feel soothing for our inner worlds as well as our outer worlds. So if you want to think about it as like an inner world versus an outer world, that could be helpful. When it comes to trauma and complex trauma, often there's more than one part at play. So you might have a client who at 10 years old moved countries or moved schools and went through some kind of experience of feeling left out. And you might have your primary work with that 10-year-old little child who has this lived experience of being left out. But you might also have a client who says, I don't have a million different inner parts. And it's like, okay, so, we have different emotional parts inside of ourselves, or we have an inner world. And for some clients, they might say, look, I had a 2 year old part that never really spoke because whenever I asked my mom for something or I cried, I was hit. So the client might remember a 2 year old part. They might have, a 7 year old part that learned how to run away. They might have a 12-year-old part that then started acting promiscuous when they started, sexually developing. So those are different parts of self. And I don't want you to confuse, parts work where we get to understand different parts and the roles they play with an inner child, though there is some overlap. So just for simple terms, inner child usually is um, a child part or an inner, young, vulnerable part of ourself that exists in all of us. We all have an inner child that really has some very big hopes and needs, and dependent on our experiences in our childhood, in our teenagehood, in our adulthood, and even right now, it will impact how we show up. And now, I always think about people who are successful or doing well in relationships, and usually they have a really nourished inner child. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have gone through an amazing childhood to have a good inner child, but lots of times in good psychotherapy, clients will sometimes say, my friends want to know or my partner wants to know what the magic is that we're doing. What's the healing work? And then a lot of times I tell them, look, we're working with you, but we're also working with your inner world. And we're also working with the hopes and the needs and the dreams or the confusion or the pain or the rage or the sadness of that little one that lives inside of you. And so that's a lot of times people say, what's the secret? And it's like when we have like that warm, snuggly feeling or this voice of compassion or care to our inner world, then we come across and we're able to feel more confident and secure and self assured in our interactions with the world. Now, just be easy on yourself if clients say, well, what's the concept of an inner child or what does it mean to have an inner world? You might want to draw like an outer circle and an inner circle and be like, look, I'm meeting you right now. This is the size of your body. You're this tall. You're this many years on the earth, right? This is your age. And you've also lived other experiences. And sometimes we land up because we have uncomfortable symptoms or coping mechanisms or fears or worries or hopes um, that are because of our life right now, right? Like you want to switch your job and you need like a boost or a pep talk, or you need someone supportive in your life, or you need a place to vent. And that might be the case. But sometimes there's big emotions or big symptoms or struggles like anxiety or trauma symptoms or flashbacks or, this chronic avoidance or discomfort with their own sexual identity or I'm not saying in terms of sexual identity being a mental health condition. What I mean is in terms of their difficulty owning and expressing their own identity, just being themselves, interacting sexually from a healthy place and a secure place, trusting their boundaries, having a sense of integrity, being able to operate from a place of steadiness, right? So a lot of those are skills that we learn over the years. And sometimes what we'll see is a client is getting stuck in a hiccup, either, working at a dead end job or being in a relationship where they chronically shut down, or they might be using drugs or alcohol or sex or their phone or work to numb and to avoid. Or they might be engaging in other kinds of behaviors or symptoms, or they might have chronic depression or, anxiety symptoms or panic or this feeling of dread or darkness or whatever it might be, or these body pains, right, from a somatic sense, pain or intrusive thoughts or these obsessive, compelling behaviors or thoughts in their head. So whatever it is, we always try to link up the symptoms with the client's current presentation. And when we always say when it feels like the roots are a lot deeper, then we get curious about their inner world because often it means that there's some kind of emotional experience or body experience, like because our body, the cells in our body carry memories, and the cells in our body feed us certain beliefs. And a lot of psychotherapy healing is not just about the here and now, it's that we want to kind of unburden or release certain intense emotions or sensations or experiences from our nervous system so you can relearn the concept of safety or to process certain emotions that kind of get stuck in the body so you can feel better and stronger. So that's a little bit of the inner child, getting to work with an inner child. We do have a blog and an exercise and a download for inner child healing. You can use it if it's helpful. What I usually find helpful is there are these meditations about getting in touch with an inner child. And those I find incredibly helpful and resourceful for helping a client just get curious about what their inner world might look like or what hope or dream or pain their inner child might have. And you can start there. There's so many different ways to start. But yeah, starting to develop a relationship with our inner selves really starts allowing for deepening the work and helping to normalize symptoms, hopes, or dreams, and be able to work through and with whatever it is that you're working with your clients.